The moment the clip hit social media, viewers could feel the shock ripple through the political world. What began as another primetime policy debate turned into a viral turning point. The night Pam Bondi, Florida's former attorney general and longtime Trump ally, lost control after appointed, unflinching takedown from Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Within hours, the exchange dominated headlines, flooded feeds, and left audiences asking the same question. How did a calm, calculated argument leave a seasoned political veteran visibly shaken? To understand the weight of that moment, you have to know the two women at its center. Pam Bondi built her reputation on fiery television appearances and unwavering loyalty to conservative causes. She speaks in absolutes: moral clarity, law and order, party discipline. Her confidence has long been her armor, her television polish her weapon. But over time, that certainty began to sound like performance. Practiced outrage delivered with courtroom. Theatrics, Jasmine Crockett arrived from a very different world, a civil rights attorney-turned-lawmaker whose rise was driven by grassroots energy and a commitment to accountability. Where Bondi projects dominance, Crockett exudes precision. Her questions cut cleanly, her tone steady even when challenged. In Congress, she earned a reputation for methodical cross-examinations that leave opponents scrambling to defend their talking points. When these two trajectories collided on national television, the contrast was electric. Bondi entered the segment prepared to spar with her usual confidence, expecting another easy ideological clash. Instead, she found herself across from someone who didn't play the same game. Crockett's strength wasn't volume, it was mastery. Every word she delivered carried quiet authority, the kind that can't be interrupted or shouted down. That difference between performance and principle framed what would soon become a defining moment for both women. What unfolded next wasn't just a political debate. It was a shift in tone, a generational confrontation over what truth sounds like when it's spoken with calm conviction. And for Pam Bondi, that truth hit harder than she ever expected. The studio lights burned bright, the kind that turn a simple discussion into a performance. Pam Bondi had been here countless times before. Comfortable, confident, in control. The topic of the night was political accountability, a theme she often turned into a sermon about double standards and media bias. She leaned into her usual rhythm: assert dominance early, question the opponent's integrity, and frame herself as the voice of reason under fire. Across from her sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, composed and deliberate. She had joined the panel to discuss transparency and government ethics, a subject that fit her reputation for detail and discipline. As Bondi began, Crockett listened quietly, hands folded, gaze fixed, not confrontational, but present in that unsettling way that suggests she's analyzing every word. Bondi's tone carried that familiar undercurrent of condescension, polished but pointed. "You know, Congresswoman, it's easy to talk about ethics when you've never had to make the tough calls," she said, her smile tight and rehearsed. The line drew polite laughter from the studio audience, but Crockett didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head as if deciding whether the comment deserved a response. Then Bondi pressed further. "It's one thing to play politics on Twitter," she continued, "and another to actually uphold the law. Some people talk about justice, others enforce it. There's a difference." That was the moment the atmosphere shifted. The implication was clear. Bondi wasn't debating ideas. She was belittling experience. Crockett had spent years as a public defender and civil rights lawyer before entering Congress. To dismiss that as playing politics wasn't just inaccurate, it was disrespectful. The live audience sensed the tension rising, that subtle electricity before a thunderclap. Crockett finally spoke, her voice steady, unhurried. "Ms. Bondi, I understand the difference quite well," she said. "The problem is, some people confuse enforcing the law with bending it." The line landed like a quiet thunderbolt. Not shouted, not exaggerated, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. Bondi blinked, clearly unprepared for the pushback. She tried to interject, but Crockett continued, still calm. "I've seen what justice looks like up close. Not from behind a podium, but in courtrooms where real people's lives are on the line. So, when we talk about accountability, let's be honest about whose accountability we mean," the audience murmured. Even the host paused, unsure whether to intervene or let the exchange unfold. Bondi smiled stiffly, the kind of smile that hides irritation, not amusement. "Well," she said, her voice tightening, "I suppose everyone has their interpretation of the law." Crockett nodded, her tone unchanging. The law doesn't need interpretation when it's applied fairly. That's the part too many people forget. It was subtle, elegant, and devastating. The power of Crockett's words wasn't in volume or insult. It was in precision. She didn't attack Bondi personally. She exposed the fragility of her argument. The crowd's reaction told the story, a mix of admiration and discomfort. The sound of viewers realizing they had just witnessed the beginning of something explosive. Bondi shifted in her seat, reaching for control. She tried to pivot back to talking points about selective justice and media narratives, but the tone had changed. Crockett's response had stripped the performance from the discussion. For the first time, Bondi looked less like the confident TV veteran and more like someone cornered by facts she couldn't spin. That was the instant the balance of power flipped. One offhand comment meant to dismiss became the spark that ignited a national moment. Viewers at home didn't see it as just another debate. They saw an old playbook failing in real time. Pam Bondi had tried to assert authority through bravado. Jasmine Crockett reclaimed it through truth. And that single exchange, quiet, composed, but razor sharp, set the stage for the takedown that would soon leave Bondi unraveling under her own spotlight. The silence that followed was thick, the kind that tells you something irreversible has begun. Pam Bondi, once master of the televised sparring match, was suddenly on defense. Her trademark smile faltered, replaced by the uneasy twitch of someone realizing the audience isn't on her side anymore. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, didn't gloat, didn't lean back, didn't even blink. She simply waited, giving Bondi the chance to speak again, to dig the hole a little deeper. Bondi took the bait. "Look, Congresswoman," she began, her tone strained, "we can't all afford to stand on the sidelines and moralize. Some of us have actually had to make difficult calls that you wouldn't understand." It was a classic move, attempt to reframe authority by questioning experience. But Crockett was ready. "Difficult calls?" she said softly, almost conversational. "You mean like defending policies that violate constitutional rights? Or turning a blind eye when the law is used as a shield for power instead of protection for people?" The studio grew still. Crockett wasn't raising her voice, but her words carried the weight of evidence, not emotion. Bondi stammered, "That's not what—" But Crockett continued, her timing precise. "Because when I see prosecutors using discretion to target dissent instead of corruption, that's not law and order. That's selective justice. And if we can't call that out, then we've abandoned what the law is supposed to stand for." There it was, the pivot that turned a debate into a reckoning. Crockett wasn't arguing politics anymore. She was indicting a system of hypocrisy that Bondi symbolized. Bondi tried one last counter. "Congresswoman, you're twisting the facts." Crockett didn't even look flustered. "No, Ms. Bondi, I'm clarifying them. There's a difference between defending justice and defending those who abuse it." The line landed like a hammer wrapped in silk. Even through the television, viewers could feel the control shift completely. The host hesitated to interrupt. Bondi sat back, visibly tense, her usual confidence gone. For years, she'd relied on sound bites and moral certainty. But Crockett wasn't playing the same game. She was rewriting it, calmly, methodically, and without breaking a sweat. By the end of the segment, the tone of the room had changed entirely. Bondi's words began to sound defensive, her usual composure eroded by the precision of Crockett's logic. Crockett, on the other hand, looked exactly as she began, steady, unbothered, in command. It wasn't a shouting match. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a demonstration of how intelligence, calm, and preparation can dismantle even the loudest bravado. And for Pam Bondi, that realization arrived too late. When the cameras cut to commercial, the look on her face said everything. She hadn't just lost a debate, she'd been outclassed. When the segment ended, the polite applause that usually followed a lively debate was replaced by uneasy silence. The host thanked both guests, but the words felt hollow. Viewers could see it. Pam Bondi's expression had shifted from controlled irritation to something closer to disbelief. She looked like someone who'd rehearsed every counter-argument, but still found herself blindsided. Crockett, meanwhile, simply gathered her notes and offered a professional smile. Her composure unbroken, the cameras cut, but the microphones were still hot for a few seconds. Long enough for the studio staff to hear Bondi mutter under her breath. It wasn't clear what she said, but the frustration was unmistakable. Producers exchanged glances. They'd seen fiery debates before, but rarely had a veteran pundit like Bondi. Within hours, clips of the exchange began circulating online. A single 40-second moment. Crockett's calm correction, Bondi's stumble, The quiet confidence that followed was all it took. By morning, hashtags like Crockett Takedown and Pam Bondi Meltdown were trending across platforms. Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok all filled with side-by-side edits comparing Crockett's restraint to Bondi's unraveling. Bondi didn't take it well. The next day, she appeared on a conservative morning show, visibly irritated, insisting she had been ambushed and disrespected. She accused the host of losing control of the segment, implying that the production favored Crockett. "It's hard to debate someone who's rehearsed to interrupt," she said, her tone defensive. But even sympathetic interviewers couldn't ignore how rattled she seemed. Commentators across the spectrum weighed in. Progressive outlets called Crockett's performance a masterclass in controlled authority. Conservative pundits, while defending Bondi, admitted she seemed off her rhythm. The consensus was clear. Crockett had won not by force, but by poise. In Washington, colleagues took notice. Crockett's staff said her office received hundreds of calls and emails praising her composure. One message, read aloud by her aide, summed up the moment. "You didn't just win an argument. You showed how power really looks when it's honest." Meanwhile, Bondi's allies tried to reframe the narrative, calling her the victim of media editing. But the uncut footage told another story, one where every word was live, unscripted, and undeniable. No edits could erase the raw contrast between Bondi's defensiveness and Crockett's calm certainty. Behind the scenes, the network's producers debated whether to rebroadcast the segment. Some wanted to highlight the viral buzz. Others feared it would appear exploitative. Ultimately, they released the full discussion online, and the response was overwhelming. Millions of views poured in, most praising Crockett's grace under fire. By the end of the week, Bondi's frustration had turned into damage control. Her representatives issued a short statement urging respectful political dialogue, but it read more like an attempt to move on. Crockett, for her part, stayed silent. No follow-up interviews, no social media posts, just silence. That silence became its own statement, one that said, "When you've made your point, you don't need to keep talking." In politics, fallout often defines the fight more than the confrontation itself. And in this case, the fallout was unmistakable. Pam Bondi had gone in expecting to control the narrative. Jasmine Crockett walked out owning it. For Bondi, it was a humbling reminder that television confidence isn't the same as truth. For Crockett, it was validation, proof that calm, clear, and credible still win, even in a world addicted to outrage. Moments like this don't just make headlines. They reveal deeper truths about how politics, media, and power operate in America today. Pam Bondi's confrontation with Jasmine Crockett wasn't simply a disagreement between two women. It was a collision between two eras of communication. One relied on spectacle, the other on substance. For years, Bondi has embodied the classic model of political television: quick sound bites, emotional appeals, and strategic indignation. It's a formula that worked well in a media environment built for reaction, not reflection. Her confidence was designed to dominate a split-screen debate, raise the voice, deliver a punchline, and declare victory before the commercial break. It's a strategy perfected during the Trump years, built on conviction more than evidence, loyalty more than logic. Jasmine Crockett represented something entirely different. Her power wasn't in performance, but in presence. Every sentence she spoke carried intention. She didn't rush. She didn't interrupt. She used silence as a tool, letting Bondi's defensiveness echo long enough for the audience to notice. In doing so, she broke one of the unspoken rules of televised politics: whoever speaks louder wins. Instead, Crockett proved that control is louder than noise. This wasn't just a stylistic difference, it was generational. Bondi's approach belongs to an age of broadcast dominance, where a few networks controlled the story and pundits shaped perception. Crockett's strength is rooted in the modern media ecosystem: decentralized, viral, and unforgivingly transparent. In this world, authenticity travels faster than spin. A single unscripted moment of composure can overshadow years of manufactured talking points. Political analysts quickly recognized the symbolism. Crockett's calm dismantling of Bondi's rhetoric wasn't merely a victory in debate. It was a lesson in how facts, delivered with poise, can neutralize outrage. It underscored a growing shift in political communication, from charisma-driven commentary to credibility-driven discourse. Viewers no longer crave confrontation. They crave clarity. Gender also played a subtle, powerful role. Historically, women in politics have been forced to navigate impossible expectations. Too assertive and they're labeled angry, too measured and they're called weak. Crockett balanced that line flawlessly. She didn't match Bondi's energy. She redirected it. She demonstrated that authority doesn't have to shout. In that moment, she redefined what strength looks like on camera: firm, factual, and unshaken. The exchange also touched a cultural nerve about accountability. Bondi's frustration wasn't just about losing an argument, it was about losing control over the narrative she had long mastered. Crockett, through calm correction, exposed the fragility of that narrative, one that depends on emotional manipulation rather than empirical truth. In the broader landscape, this was about more than two personalities. It was about a turning point in political tone, a movement away from outrage politics towards something more sustainable: integrity. Crockett's performance suggested that the public is ready for leaders who prioritize thought over theatrics. Even seasoned commentators admitted that watching the exchange felt different. It wasn't entertaining in the traditional sense. It was enlightening. It didn't leave viewers cheering for a winner, but thinking about how political dialogue could evolve if more leaders carried themselves the way Crockett did. And perhaps that's why it mattered. The moment wasn't just viral because it was dramatic. It was viral because it was real. It reminded people that authenticity still cuts through the noise. For Bondi, it was a humbling experience. For Crockett, it was confirmation that power, when paired with truth, doesn't need to shout to be heard. By the weekend, the Crockett-Bondi exchange had transformed from a viral clip into a cultural conversation. What started as a tense on-air moment was now being dissected across podcasts, op-eds, and social media threads. The focus wasn't just on what was said, it was on how it was said. Audiences from every corner of the political spectrum saw something larger than a debate. They saw a generational recalibration of tone, truth, and temperament. On Twitter, the clip spread like wildfire. Users created split-screen comparisons, Bondi's rising voice on one side, Crockett's calm gaze on the other. TikTok turned it into a meme template. When you bring drama, and they bring receipts. Instagram Reels stitched Crockett's quiet retort with captions like, "The new face of political grace." Within 72 hours, the video had millions of views, hundreds of thousands of shares, and a comment section that looked more like a town hall than a social feed. But beyond the jokes and applause, something deeper resonated. Viewers saw in Crockett a kind of authenticity that felt increasingly rare. Someone not performing outrage but practicing discipline. Her ability to maintain composure in the face of provocation struck a cultural chord, especially among younger audiences tired of politics as entertainment. They weren't just admiring her words. They were studying her demeanor, quoting her phrasing in leadership workshops, and posting reaction videos breaking down her rhetorical control. Meanwhile, Bondi became a reluctant symbol of a fading style, the era of loud certainty and moral posturing. Even some conservative commentators admitted that the clip revealed how performative punditry can collapse under genuine scrutiny. It wasn't that Bondi lacked experience, it was that the audience had evolved. In an age where clips circulate faster than context, authenticity wins. News outlets framed the exchange as a microcosm of political evolution. The Washington Post called it a masterclass in composure. Commentators on YouTube and independent political podcasts described it as the shift from television politics to digital. Accountability. It became an example used in media studies classrooms, where professors analyzed how tone, gender dynamics, and credibility shape modern persuasion. For Crockett's supporters, the moment became a rallying point, proof that professionalism still has power. Hashtags turned into slogans, and within days people were printing them on shirts and mugs. The phrase "Stay Crockett Calm" started trending, a mantra for political discourse done right, and perhaps the most telling indicator of its cultural impact was silence. Crockett's choice to let the clip speak for itself. She didn't gloat or capitalize on the fame. She simply carried on with her work, letting the public draw their own conclusions. That restraint elevated the moment beyond politics. It became a study in dignity. By the time the buzz began to fade, the meaning of the event had already settled into the public conscience. In an era fueled by outrage, composure itself had become revolutionary. Beyond the viral headlines and partisan reactions, the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Pam Bondi carried a profound message about power, not the kind measured in votes or titles, but the kind expressed through presence, restraint, and command of truth. Crockett's performance was not just political, it was philosophical. She reminded audiences that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it breathes. Her calmness wasn't passivity, it was precision. By choosing control over chaos, she subverted a long-standing expectation that credibility in politics requires aggression. Her composure became its own argument, that integrity and intellect can triumph without spectacle. In that moment, the exchange exposed a stark cultural tension, the battle between reaction and reason. Bondi's approach, loud and forceful, reflected an older model of persuasion, one based on domination, on the idea that whoever controls the volume controls the truth. Crockett, on the other hand, embodied a newer paradigm, one that values emotional intelligence as a tool of leadership. She didn't just answer. She guided the conversation back to substance, refusing to let theatrics drown the facts. This was more than a stylistic clash. It was a statement about evolution. The moment challenged the media ecosystem that thrives on outrage. Viewers found themselves drawn to Crockett's restraint because it felt real, uncalculated, and earned. In a culture exhausted by noise, silence can feel like power. There was also an undeniable symbolism in the dynamic between the two women. Crockett, a younger Black congresswoman representing a new generation of leadership, faced off against Bondi, a veteran political figure shaped by the old guard of partisan combat. Their interaction wasn't just a personal showdown, it was a reflection of shifting political gravity. Representation was meeting establishment. Authenticity was meeting performance. And authenticity won. Analysts later noted how Crockett's discipline turned what could have been a heated argument into a cultural parable. She didn't win by overpowering Bondi. She won by outlasting her. Her calmness forced Bondi's rhetoric to collapse under its own weight. Viewers didn't just see confidence. They saw conviction built on principle. That distinction between confidence and conviction became the defining lesson of the moment. Crockett's message, though unspoken, was unmistakable. True strength isn't about asserting dominance. It's about mastering yourself in the face of provocation. It's the ability to let emotion knock at the door and still decide not to let it in. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. As the clip continued to circulate, people began to articulate what many felt instinctively, that Crockett had modeled a new political language, one where control is the counter to chaos and grace the antidote to grandstanding. She showed that in the arena of modern discourse, poise is not just politeness, it's strategy. In an age where shouting has become the soundtrack of politics, Jasmine Crockett proved something revolutionary. The quiet voice of reason still carries. And sometimes, it echoes the loudest. When the dust finally settled, what lingered wasn't Pam Bondi's fury or even the specifics of her argument. What lingered was Jasmine Crockett's unshakable grace. The entire exchange, from its fiery inception to its viral afterlife, became a living demonstration of how restraint can rewrite the narrative in real time. Crockett's strength wasn't in her words alone, it was in the spaces between them. Every pause, every measured breath, every deliberate choice not to retaliate emotionally sent a message louder than any soundbite. She showed that poise can be its own form of protest. When Bondi's volume rose, Crockett's stillness created contrast. When the debate threatened to spiral, her discipline re-centered it. In that sense, she didn't just win the argument, she redefined its terms. Looking back, political analysts compared the moment to past instances when women in politics faced hostility and chose composure as their shield. Figures like Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama have also embodied that same ethos, a kind of moral steadiness that refuses to be provoked into caricature. Crockett joined that lineage, not through imitation, but through instinct. She didn't need to posture or perform. She simply was. In interviews afterward, Crockett's silence on the matter spoke volumes. She didn't take victory laps or issue retaliatory comments. Her focus stayed on the work: legislation, community, and leadership. That quiet professionalism became part of the lesson, that dignity outlasts debate. The internet may amplify noise, but time rewards substance. Bondi's reaction, by contrast, seemed to underline the cost of losing composure in a digital era. Each attempt to defend her stance only deepened the perception that she had been undone by her own tactics. Even among neutral observers, there was a sense that the clash had revealed a generational shift from performance politics to purpose-driven dialogue. What made Crockett's response resonate wasn't just its style, but its moral weight. She reminded people that leadership isn't about dominating an opponent. It's about embodying the values you claim to defend. In that sense, her victory wasn't over Bondi, it was over the culture of confrontation itself. For millions who watched, rewatched, and shared the clip, the takeaway was clear. Strength is not found in shouting the loudest, but in standing the tallest. Crockett's poise became a mirror reflecting what many citizens crave: decency in a world addicted to outrage. In the broader story of American politics, moments like this matter because they reset expectations. They remind us that courage doesn't always look like defiance. Sometimes it looks like calm. Crockett's grace under fire wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a public revelation that restraint can be radical, and that integrity still has an audience. As the echoes of that confrontation fade, what remains is a truth as steady as her tone. Chaos may dominate the headlines, but composure writes history. In the end, the exchange between Jasmine Crockett and Pam Bondi became more than just another viral political moment. It became a touchstone for what integrity looks like in the digital age. It challenged every viewer, every voter, and every citizen to ask themselves, what kind of leadership do we truly value? The shouting match may have lasted only minutes, but the conversation it sparked continues to ripple far beyond that screen. Crockett's composure didn't just silence an opponent, it awakened a movement of reflection. Her calmness reminded people that political power doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears patience. The discipline she displayed is what every democracy desperately needs: leaders who listen before they speak, who ground emotion with empathy, and who meet hostility not with vengeance, but with vision. For the audience watching from home, especially younger voters and those disillusioned by partisan warfare, this moment was a quiet call to arms. It whispered that change doesn't begin with outrage. It begins with example. Crockett showed that the next generation of public servants can redefine politics through authenticity, transparency, and an unshakable moral compass. She proved that a new tone is possible, one rooted in conviction rather than chaos. This is where you, the viewer, come in. Every time you share a clip like this, every time you speak up in a conversation, every time you choose empathy over escalation, you reinforce the very values Crockett embodied. The world doesn't change through one exchange, but through millions of moments of composure that echo it. If you want a political culture that reflects truth over theatrics, it starts with what you amplify. Pam Bondi's anger will fade from memory, but Crockett's steadiness has already entered the lexicon of modern leadership. It's a reminder that politics doesn't have to sound like chaos to be effective. It can sound like courage, reason, and humanity. The fact that her response resonated across party lines shows something powerful: that decency still has bipartisan appeal. So as we close this story, let it not just be remembered as that viral takedown, let it be remembered as a turning point, a moment when a single act of composure lit a path forward for discourse itself. This is the kind of moment Jasmine Nation was built to highlight. Moments where truth meets power and civility outshines spectacle. If you believe in restoring substance to our politics, this is your reminder. Stay engaged, stay informed, and above all, stay grounded. Because history isn't written by the loudest voices in the room. It's written by the calmest hands holding the pen.